Welcome to the Dream Show. I'm Jane Teresa Anderson, and this is episode 234. And our guest today is Sue from Rye in England. And if you haven't listened to the show before, you probably need to know, starting out, that what happens is that we tee it all up with a guest, but we have no idea what dream they're going to bring to the show. So we phoned Sue, and we were just sort of getting some technical stuff happening before we went on air, before we started recording. And she said, I contacted you to be a guest on the Dream Show when I had a really unusual dream. And I know you don't know what it is, but I've just had a dream just a few days ago that's even more unusual, and I'd like to bring this one. And as you'll hear, I and she are very glad that she did, because as you listen to how she relates the dream to what's going on in her life, it turned out that as we recorded this dream, which was early this morning for Sue in England and late at night for us in Australia, but for Sue, later in the day, she was going to have an extremely important Zoom meeting, and everything that we explored in the dream was adding to the bearing of what may or may not happen at that Zoom meeting. So I think you're going to find this interesting at all kinds of levels. So just before we go there, my websites are janeteresa.com. That's Teresa without an H. And that's where you can go to find lots of free resources, to listen to every episode of The Dream Show that's ever been, to find out how you can consult with me, find out how you can buy my books, and also find out how you can do courses, my online courses, so you can learn how to interpret your own dreams, how to work with them, and even do my online course to learn how to be a dream therapist. The separate website for the online learning platforms is the Dream Academy, which is dream-academy-online.com. But let's get on to the more important thing, and here we are with Sue. Welcome to the Dream Show, Sue.
Hello.
And you are in Rye in England, or near Rye, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes, not too far away from the coast, in the countryside.
Oh, you've got the best of both, the countryside and the water.
Yes, indeed, yes. Very nice, yes.
And you've got up nice and early to deal with our time zones, but, probably a good time of the day to talk about a dream, first thing in the morning.
Yes, indeed, it is, isn't it? Yes, it really is.
So,
really is.
As usual, of course, I've got no idea what dream any guest brings, so over to you, Sue.
Okay, is it okay if I read it out and just add, because I wrote it all down.
Perfect.
I'll just add a couple of bits. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, this was, just for information, Monday the 31st of August, just gone. I had seen a house I liked. It was very small, and God, I can't read my writing there. One story. And I wasn't sure why I was interested in it, as it would have just been for me. And what about Steve? That's my husband. Mm. During the dream, I was referred to once by my maiden name. And I went to view the house. And the woman who lived there was packing up her stuff. And on the way there, I realised that the access to the house was very difficult and narrow, and there seemed to be quite a lot of people around in the near vicinity. Maybe it was some kind of shared land arrangement, and that put me off a lot, but I still went through with the viewing. And I asked the friends I was with, and these were old friends from school, I think, who I don't see now, I've lost touch with. And I asked them what they thought of the house, and they said it was too small. And I thought so also. And the kitchen seemed so small, I asked the woman how she cooked there. When I went exploring the house, though, there was a whole other area I hadn't seen before, and there were large bedrooms, a storage area, and a huge, very modern bathroom. The initial part of the house, and the bit I found later, did not seem to marry up at all. Somehow, while I was going through the house, I came across a box. It must have belonged to the woman, but it seemed okay for me to look into it. There was something in it which I thought in the dream was a cat's stomach. Now, this would be utterly repulsive to me in real life, being a total animal lover, but in the dream, I didn't make too much of it. Inside the gut, which was like a membrane and not ultra messy, there were a couple of sets of keys and other items, and there were also jewels in the box, which seemed valuable. And I was trying to show the woman these things, but she was distracted. She knew about the jewels, but I wasn't clear what the keys were for. I was under pressure at this point because my friends were there and more were arriving, saying how good it was to see me, it had been ages, etc., etc. And I had to put them off a bit because I wanted to sort out this box. And then at some point after that, I was in the bathroom and there were people outside the house nearby. I tried to close the blinds, but it was difficult. They were, and because I've just used a bathroom analogy, I mean, when I read it, I thought, oh dear, that sounds a bit unpleasant. Anyway, but I've written they were dumping what seemed to be a load of vegetables very close to the house. And when I told the woman, she was unconcerned about it, as if it was a natural occurrence. And within myself at this point, I had decided I did not want this new house at all. That's the end.
Okay, so I'm just writing down the last bit. I didn't want this house at all. So that
No.
even though you had found these other amazing rooms in it, it still wasn't enough for you to want the house.
No, well, the sense was, why am I moving anyway? Because I didn't want to move. But I'd seen this one and I was sort of drawn to go and look at it, even though it was so small. But then it wasn't so small.
That's really interesting. What of all the things, and I get the impression it wasn't the cat's stomach, but what was the thing that really put you off it in the end?
It was the narrow and difficult access, and all these people around all over the place. I actually live somewhere that's quite remote. Well, relatively speaking, it's not that remote, not by Australian standards for sure. But yes, it felt like I was what's the word? That people were sort of encroaching on my space.
Yes.
Although it wasn't my house, that's what I felt. That it was like they were all over the place. They were right there, and you couldn't get to where this house was without being, all these people being there. Then there were the people outside, right by the house. As if there was no privacy.
No privacy, even in the bathroom where you should have privacy, and you ended up trying to put down the blinds as well. So, no privacy at all. And even once you did, even if you went through all of that, encroaching on all the people encroaching on your space, you get into the house and it's like, what space to begin with, until you notice that there are some spacious rooms there. Let's begin with the idea, Sue, that the dream may or may not be about a sense of people encroaching on your space in all sorts of ways, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. Let's begin with that kind of feeling. But let's go straight into this really interesting symbol of the cat's stomach, because I think we've got to start there. So you're an animal lover. Yes. And you found a box and it seemed okay to look into it. And somehow there was something about the way that you said, it seemed okay to look into it, that gave me the impression that there might be something that happened at the time of the dream that you thought, I think I'll look into that. Not a box, but a situation or a possibility or an opportunity that I think I'll have a look into that. It had that kind of feeling.
I'm trying to. Are you asking me, or just you're going to go through it now?
I'm going to go through it, but at any point, if you think I want to add to this, you do so.
Okay, all right. I'm going to take some notes then.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to know about this cat's stomach. So, you got the impression, you said it was like a membrane and it wasn't messy. So, can you describe it a little bit more?
Well, I don't know how I knew it was a cat's stomach, because obviously I've never seen anything like that. Well, I haven't seen anything like that. And initially, there was a sense of, oh my goodness. But it was sort of whitey, cleary, a bit like a sort of stretchy bag, that was slightly opaque. But it wasn't. Obviously, I touched it because I was getting these keys. Or looking inside to see what was there, and there were these keys. But, touching it wasn't as it would as you'd expect it to be from my description. You know, it was just not repulsive.
And what do you feel about cats? You say you're an animal lover, but specifically, what do you feel about cats?
Well, I mean, I've got my own cat. You know, I think if you said, are you a dog person or a cat person, as people can be, I've got a dog as well. I'd probably would be more a dog person. But I had cats when I was a child. Interestingly, I was attacked by a cat, not my own cat. A couple of weeks ago, when I was walking the dog, and a cat flew out and attacked the dog. And I mean, actually, I wasn't attacked, but I got caught up in the crossfire, and got scratched. So this cat on the walk in the village. Actually, in the churchyard of all places.
A churchyard cat.
Yes, it was. It was a church. I think so. I don't think it was completely feral. It looked like it had been well looked after. You know, it was quite well fed and everything else. But obviously, I think my dog had been looking at it. I hadn't seen it. I didn't know it was there. He was looking at it. It was probably in the hedge, and it flew out at him. So I was, you know, trying to sort the dog out. The dog's quite small, so I was trying to pick the dog up, and there were other people there, interestingly, and I was talking to them before all this happened, just having passing time of day, and after the cat flew out and attacked my dog, and there was a slight pause, and then another cat flew out and attacked the first cat. I mean, you couldn't make it up, really.
Oh my goodness!
It was quite a furore. And then after I'd seen to the dog, which was my only concern, one of these people said to me, "Look, you're bleeding." And I looked at my legs, and I got 2 hefty scratches with all blood running down, which was, oh, goodness, I thought, you know. And then I thought, oh, dear, cat scratches, am I going to get this or that? I'll have to rush home and so on. Anyway, I'm fine. Couple of little scars, but apart from that, I'm fine. But that is a sort of a cat-related episode.
It certainly is, yeah.
That was quite recent, yes, quite recent.
And it may or may not turn out that as we explore it, that whatever you were thinking when you were walking along the road that day, walking your dog, may relate, you know, may have then become related to the cats in your mind, so that when you were processing that later, the two may have become involved. But there's definitely not only a key to that cat, but there's 2 keys that we know we want to find, and some jewels there too. So we'll give the cat a little rest and come back to it. There's something really important there, and I think, you know, what springs to mind for me is it's the cat's stomach, and there was quite a lot of attention to the kitchen when you were looking around this house. So in the stomach is where we eat food or prepare food, and I guess you could say at the end of the dream that you decided that you didn't stomach the house, it wasn't for you. So I think it's going to be something along those lines, which we'll come back to. And of course, when the cats flew out to you in waking life and actually did scratch you, that was very much encroaching on your boundaries and your space there too. So there may be some element of this cat in the box that is, symbolising encroaching on your space. And yet that cat in the dream had something amazing. It had the valuable jewels and 2 sets of keys. So it's something really lovely, and something that would otherwise be quite yucky, something to get there. And again, it may relate to what was happening when you took the dogs for a walk, or it may relate to that when we do allow people to encroach upon us a bit, even if we don't really want that feeling, that sometimes there are jewels or gifts within that. You know, my mind goes immediately to think of that thing about it's a Buddhist saying, I can't remember the original words, but the essence of it is that if you go into a cave and meditate for 20 years, you're absolutely perfect at relationships. But if you come out of that cave and walk down the street and start to interact with someone, then that's a whole different thing, you know, the reality of it. So there's a sense of when you keep yourself to yourself, you can get into a wonderful spiritual state, or you can become very clear about what you want and how you live and how you are. But it's interacting with other people that can get yucky and horrible, but can also actually refine you through the challenges that you have to meet in these encroaching situations. So there could be something along those lines there.
Yes.
Another big key, Sue, is the friends that were there, because they were friends that you haven't seen for a long time. They're friends from the past. So
Yes.
I think you said they were school friends, did you?
Yes, certainly. There were about 3 of them, but I only really remember one. Clearly, there were 3 there, and they were sort of all together. But I only really remember one of them. As in, the other ones probably were school friends, but I can't see them, if you like. I can't recall who they were in the dream.
So the one that you could recall, what do you remember about her? What was her personality or her approach to life, or how did you get on with her back in school?
I got on well with her. I got on fine with her. We were part of a group of friends. She wasn't a particularly close friend of mine, nor me of her, but she was in the group. She was a nice girl. This was primary school, first school, so below the age of 11.
Yes.
These were friends from, and I did know them after and keep in touch, although we didn't go to the same secondary school. I did keep in touch, and we were in touch after, but not for many, many years now. So yes, she was a nice person. They were all close, this group. I think there's probably the group that were close. I mean, it sounds bizarre, but I'll say it. I mean, the most striking thing about this particular old school friend was that she lost all the colour of her in her hair when she was very young. Her hair went completely white in her teenage and 20s, and not just grey, just completely white. It looked really nice actually, but it was completely white. And whenever I think of her, which I haven't done, not consciously, but if I do think of her, I remember. That's what I remember. That's the most striking thing, really.
So it was striking. And did you have any feeling at the time when that happened to her that why her hair had turned white?
No, I think not at the time. I mean, if I was reflecting on it now, I would say, did she have some terrible shock? Or, had she been ill and I didn't know? Those kind of things. But at the time, no, I didn't,
Yeah, interesting, because you had a shock of a kind when the cats jumped out at you from the churchyard graveyard, probably not in the same level of shock that she may have had when your hair went white. But one of the things that jumped out to me is you were mentioning that the group was not close. It was kind of close, but not really close. And of course, a big threat.
Sorry, Jane Teresa. They were close, but I wasn't so close with them, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
They were close amongst themselves. They were quite a close-knit group. I'm sure they're still in touch today, because I still am in touch with one that wasn't in this group who knows them.
So there's a sense,
they're still in touch.
Yeah, there's a sense there then that they were close, but you were not so close. And there's a whole feeling in your dream about not wanting to be too close to people. I want my space.
Yes.
So
certainly physically.
Yeah, physically. Yes. So, often you'll get in a dream. You're often looking for a set of opposites. Where are the opposites? And that is one possibility here. There's the physical, as you say, physical, small, close, encroaching on space, and then this girl coming up as a symbol, partly of having belonged to a close group, but also partly of you not being quite so close with her. So that may be one of the things in this dream. How close do I want to be, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, within some area of my life? So let's look at the beginning. You see this house and you liked it, but it was small and it was one story. So what does a one-story house mean to you?
Well, I live in a one-story house, and I suppose you've lived in the UK, so you know. I mean, and I don't know whether they call them the same in Australia, but there's a certain kind of single-story house that they call a bungalow.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And for me, that particular word, I mean, I just don't like that word. And I mean, that's really just an idiosyncratic thing. But this house, although it was small, or I thought it was, and it was one story, it still didn't fit the what I would describe as a bungalow. It was a bit more, I don't know what I'd call it. I mean, if I said eccentric looking, that would make it sound more exotic than it was, if you know what I mean. But it just wasn't what I'd call a bog standard bungalow.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with those houses whatsoever. It's just my own thought that I wouldn't want to live in one of those. However, this didn't create that. So when you say, what does a one-story house mean to you? I have got strong feelings about them, and I live in one, which I don't call a bungalow. So it's like I'm keen on how I interpret certain things, or how I would label certain things.
Yes.
You know, so if somebody said to me, "Oh, you live in a bungalow," I said, "Well, I don't like calling it a bungalow."
I really love that. I love that we redefine for ourselves, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. And in the dream, I get the sense of, although it is a one-story building, there's also that sense of, is this something that only has one story about it, one tale to tell? Except when you look at it, as not, as you put, a bog standard story, it's actually got something really not exotic, as you said, but eccentric behind this. So it's where do I, Sue, at the beginning of this dream feel like, oh my goodness, the beginning of a dream often sets the theme, like this is what the rest of the dream is about. So there's a sense at the beginning of the dream as, but there's something I quite like now. It's not something I would normally like. It's kind of pretty bog standard, really, and it may be a one story kind of thing. But there's something that attracts me a little bit about this, whatever it is. And as you explore it more, it really gets quite eccentric. It really gets quite unusual. So it could be an idea, a situation, a challenge, a job, a way of being that you're thinking about. But it's something that seems to be at first bog standard, small, but actually, even though at the end of the dream you decide against it, actually has an attraction in it. An attraction which becomes something that you can tell a different story about. If I take this place, maybe I'm not going to call it a bungalow either. I'm going to call it something or other else. I'm going to tell a story about it. So it's something that you're thinking about. There's something that I kind of like, and maybe I can reframe it if I really do like it. And maybe, as it turns out, it's kind of could be a bit eccentric, might be something I might be interested in. But at the beginning of the dream, you also say, but it's just for me. What about my husband? Did you say your husband's name was Steve?
Yes.
So the sense of the dream was that it was just going to be for you, not for both of you?
Well, I mean, it was puzzling to me because I looked at I think I'd seen it and was interested in it, and then I went back. So I got my interest, going with it, and then I went back to look at it, which is when I discovered all this narrow access and people all around and all this business that I wasn't keen on, but I still went ahead with the viewing. But I was, at some point of me was thinking, well, why am I doing this? Because, what about Steve? And yet there was no reason why Steve couldn't have lived in this place.
No, that's right.
It's like I was looking just for me. I was looking just for me.
You're looking just for you. Remembering that dreams are symbolic, so we're not actually talking about a house to live in here. We're talking about something that's just for you. And so sometimes a little bit of your conscious mind goes, oh, wait a minute, what about Steve? But on the other hand, this is something that is just about you. And you mentioned that you were referred to by your maiden name at some point during the viewing as well.
That's right. Exactly.
So
yes. Indeed.
So the maiden name combined with the fact that you also have the sort of friends back from when that was your name.
Yes.
And of course also to state the obvious, when it was your maiden name, presumably it's kind of saying that's when you weren't married to Steve, at least, whether or not he was around. So your maiden name has taken you back to just for me. This is me, you know. I'm not asking you to give your maiden name, obviously, Sue, because this is everybody's listening in. But is your maiden name a name that you like? Were you happy to exchange it for your married name? What are your feelings about your maiden name?
Well, I did like my maiden name. I do like my maiden name, and when my married name is quite. It's not that unusual, but it's a bit unusual, and people often mispronounce it and misspell it, and they often mispronounce it with something, you know, that's, I say not very nice. That sounds a bit weak, but you know, you know what they say, they can't pronounce it anyway, and they have difficulty with it. So, when I was getting married, and we are going back 30 years, I sort of mooted the idea about keeping my name, and my husband was, you know, dead set against that, and I didn't feel that it was a deal breaker. You know, I thought his arguments, for, you know, that he put forward for why he wanted it to be like this, you know, I understood, and that made sense to me. And I was okay with that, and you know, I've not really thought about consciously my maiden name or my name since, you know, not in that way. But there was that at the time. It wasn't you know, there was a debate about it.
That makes sense. You know, your unconscious mind remembers everything, of course. So for your unconscious mind to sort of come up in the dream and say, oh, we're talking about something that's just for you, something that's, you know, that's all about you. And there are shades of that in that discussion that you had before you got married, that, you know, well, actually, perhaps I would rather keep my maiden name, but you did it for the reasons that Steve put forward. So there's a sense there of where in my life do I sometimes want to do something just for me, but because I'm such a lovely person, I take into account whatever everybody else says and listen to their arguments.
You've really hit it on the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
That's definitely me.
So it's likely, you know, because our dreams actually are processing the 1 to 2 days beforehand, and this dream was very recently. As we're recording this, it's only 2 or 3 days later. It's possible that something came up for you around that time or with that situation where you graciously conceded or listened to another argument, and it, you know, with something that did look interesting for you, but to sort of maybe change your mind a bit. But the dream has taken you back to really unpack this a bit more, I guess. So that kind of also makes sense, Sue, doesn't it, of my feeling that it's a one-story house in terms of not just one level, but one tale to tell. It's like there's one explanation, there's one argument to put, you know, and somebody has put an argument to you and you've gone, okay, all right, well, I accept that, rather than actually maybe there's another story here, which is my story and something that is just for me. So there's a woman packing up. Can you describe her a little bit more?
She was young, middle-age. Her energies, not the way she looked, but her energies remind me, as I'm remembering the dream, remind me of somebody, but I can't get hold of who it is. It's just, you know, it's a sort of a familiarity about, not the way she looks, but the way there's something about her. But she was young, middle-aged, I say brown hair. I can't see much more than that. You know, ordinary, a perfectly ordinary person. But she was distracted, and I got the feeling, and I don't remember this from the dream, but I got the feeling that we'd had a previous encounter, you know, when I'd got interested in this caps.
Yes.
And that she was quite different then, but it was like she completely shut off from that, and she was just focusing on getting packed up, even though, I mean, presumably she hadn't told it, but that was all that in the back. Then I'm bringing logic in, you know.
Get rid of that logic.
She was packing up. Yes, she was packing up, and I was free to look around. But these friends from school were there, and as I said, more came later, and it was like they were all coming to see me. Oh, how lovely to see you! I haven't seen you for so long, etc., etc.
Yes.
And I was thinking, oh goodness, but I can't deal with you right now. I've got this to do.
Okay, so the woman, everyone in a dream represents something about the dreamer, and the reason that she felt energetically so familiar, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it, was because she's a part of yourself, and you may have defined her by the age when you sort of said, I think, young to middle age, so it sort of maybe go back to around about then. And then the moment that you described her as, she was perfectly ordinary, really, but I felt she'd been different before that, but she was shut off, kind of goes with what we've been talking about. Kind of goes with that right. sense of Sue, was different when I was younger. And to some extent, at some level, I sort of became perfectly ordinary, not judged by anyone else, judged by yourself. It kind of goes with the bog standard bungalow definition. Like, I don't like bog standard. I don't like perfectly ordinary. Oh my God, what's happening to me? Oh, did I really change my name when I got married? Why didn't I stay with my maiden name? Why I was different then, but why am I shutting it off? And yet in the dream, she was distracted too. So there'll be a part of yourself that has wanted to kind of go back to a special kind of eccentric energy. I say eccentric because you saw eccentricity in the house, an eccentric energy that you have shut off, and you're not always aware of it because you get distracted, and you kind of get distracted along the, maybe I should be perfectly ordinary, bog standard bungalow, listen to what people say and not step outside the lines kind of feeling. And you meet that part of yourself in the dream. She's packing up, she's going away, and you're actually looking at taking over a house. But are you looking at taking over perfectly ordinary, or are you looking at taking over something a bit different I've shut off? Now, the moment, excuse my keeping on talking here, but it's just coming out my mouth so quick. The moment you say she was different and kind of shut off, I'm thinking you've got what appears to be a small house that's shut off, but actually when you opened it up, it had all these extra rooms and all this extra space. And so that bigger version of the house, to me, is the bigger version of yourself, of course, but also particularly the bigger version of yourself in the past. All these eccentricities and my different way of being, all the things that I have shut off from myself and become this tiny little house. And yet something about this house, I like it. I'm looking at it because there's something about here that's attractive. And maybe what's attractive is, on the one hand, you're thinking, well, maybe we should be leading these sort of small little bog standard lives. Maybe that's the right thing to do. And maybe the other thing that's attractive about it is, but look, there's a couple of keys here, at least 2 keys and some jewels in a box. And there's actually more here than meets the eye. Do I want to go back from that? And the old friends from school are kind of there going, so nice to meet you after all this time. Is a part of yourself going, my goodness, consciously or unconsciously, so nice to meet my past self here, bordering on stepping out. How's this sounding so far?
Yes, interesting. I mean, I think I wouldn't say there's a crossroads with my work at the moment, but there are some question marks about it, not so much from me, but just about the way things have been lately with lockdown and how it's going to go and so on and so forth, with the virus situation.
Yes.
There's that element, which is a question. And also, I have been interested in things like meditation and spirituality of various sorts for many, many years, since I was that young woman, actually. And probably had more time for it then. And I've been trying to, that whole thing about make more time. We know we can't. You'll find it wherever you've dropped it, all that sort of thing. But I have been consciously, trying to spend more time finding my inner jewels, if you like.
Yes.
With meditation and that kind of thing. So there are those elements there that you're speaking about, definitely.
Gosh, and that sort of makes sense of the small box and the keys as well, lockdown and wanting to unlock from that. And also, when you first were telling the dream in the cat's stomach, I was thinking to myself, is this like a cat that's had 9 lives and it's finally lost them all? Like this was the 10th life and it's down to the stomach. But, I'm wondering also, listening to you, whether there's a sense of that. I have lived all these different kinds of approaches, and particularly with lockdown now, it feels is there something new? Is there a new way I can spin this? What do these two keys belong to? Is this another two lives here? So I love the way that you've related to the meditation there, and I love the way that you, as so many of us have being enticed to do, rethink life due to the lockdown. What jewels do I have? What extra rooms do I have? What amazing potential do I have? And do I want to go there? And how do I feel about that? And a cat, yes. A cat actually is very good at getting into through small spaces and into bigger areas, and is very curious, and
curiosity killed the cat.
It did, didn't it? And maybe its stomach's just been left. Yes. And maybe that's there's something there about perhaps, Sue, from what you say there, maybe it's like I had a curiosity in the past, the meditation, whatever, it kind of got killed off along the way. But if I revisit that and I put my hands into its stomach, I can find that here I am back in contact with the jewels, and two keys, specifically two keys, two things I can do with these jewels.
Yes, and the other thing, when you were saying about the keys, it just reminded me, keys, there are, keys and rooms, sometimes rooms are locked. And my work, I actually work as a school counsellor, and in the school where I work, where I haven't been obviously for quite some time, the room used to always be kept locked because obviously there were private papers in there. And because of the lockdown and going back, which I'm supposed to be going back next week, but the previous room has been deemed unsuitable because it's a bit small for the COVID situation, and it hasn't got an opening window. So they've been trying to find another room for me. And when you were just saying about the keys, I thought, oh yeah, two keys, two rooms. One I'm possibly not going to be going back to, and maybe a new one.
Yes,
maybe.
Absolutely.
I've certainly been thinking about this a lot, because I don't know whether I'm going to be going back physically straight away, or whether I'm going to be doing the work remotely as I was doing during lockdown.
Is there a part of you that would like to do it differently moving forward, that would like to do it more remotely or in a different sense?
Well, I did enjoy doing it remotely. I have to say, yes, and it did work well. And for all sorts of reasons, to be able to continue to do that for a bit longer, I mean, not probably forever for sure, but certainly for a bit longer, yes, that would appeal to me. And I had almost made a little, I'm sure people will be familiar with this sort of idea. I've made this sort of thing to myself, well, if I get the opportunity to work from home, that will save me this amount of time, and that bit of time that I'm saving, I'm going to dedicate to this new sort of spiritual kind of work that I want to, do more with.
Oh yes.
So it's like give me this time. I want that time. That will be a precious jewel for sure. And and then if I have that, that's what I'm going to use it for. But if I don't get it, then, well, it's not that I can't do it, obviously, but that's the little bargain I was sort of making with the universe.
It is such a wonderful opportunity. We've all got to do this, make these kind of changes, isn't it? And maybe that's the two keys too. It's not only the two keys to two different rooms at the school, but it's maybe two keys as one of the keys to my situation is to go back to school and do some level of school counselling in a bigger room. Maybe.
Yes.
And another key is to attend to my meditation jewels, my spiritual life. And can I do both of these? Are there two keys that I want here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that makes sense, in part of the house being too small, you deciding against it in the end could represent the essence of the school room being too small. Or will my life, if I go back to school, much as I have always loved that, now that I've experienced something different, is that something that's too small for me? Am I actually really ready for opening up the back and having these more eccentric places? So if we sort of roll with that kind of feeling, I'm wondering at the end of the dream, where people were dumping veggies too close to the house.
Yes.
And you were unconcerned. Then I can't read my writing.
No, she was unconcerned, if you like, but
right.
the other woman, it was obviously me, as you're saying. Yeah, she was unconcerned, as if it was a natural occurrence. That was how it was.
That was it, a natural occurrence, yeah.
Yes.
So when you think about dumping veggies, like, were they edible veggies? Were they past it?
I don't quite know. I don't think they were past it, but I grow vegetables, and I had a glut of courgettes, and I've had to cut a few off and leave them. I haven't had to leave them; they'll go on the compost. But I've left them close by where the plant is. But I've taken them off the plant and left them there. So you could say that I have dumped them.
You have, yes.
I have actually dumped them, and that would be a natural occurrence, and it is a natural occurrence, and then I will clear that up later.
Absolutely.
So it's just when I was harvesting, oh yes, big ones there, take those off, they'll take all everything from the plants, and then I'll take the new ones, because obviously I've missed a few, and they grow like mad, don't they?
They do.
Yes,
so I love that it's a natural occurrence, Sue, and you're so onto it here. But that you said that one of the things that you would do, you've temporarily dumped them in real life in the garden, but you said, actually, I'll put them on the compost later, so they will have new life, and they will go and be fertilizer to help something else grow. So maybe there's that sense in the dream too of something that I have grown in, like growing veggies at home, but in school or in this place that I perceive of as too full of people, maybe the work as a school counsellor, and it's been overabundant. I've had to dump some, but maybe there's something going on there with lockdown. What that you normally would have done at school have you had to dump, and how can you recycle that to feed a different energy, like, for example, the meditation? What's coming up for you as I'm mentioning these things?
Yes, I'm thinking it's interesting because, a lot of people have said to me, like, as the friends are saying to me in the dream, oh, we think this is too small for you. People haven't said that to me, but they've said, oh, what are you doing about school? What are you doing about this? What's happening? And I'm saying, oh, well, I don't know. And people are saying, oh, you still want to do it? And you still, yes, I do. And I do. And I wish I had the energy I had 30 years ago that I could do all that and do everything else. But yes. I know I can't. I haven't got the energy I had 30 odd years ago now. Yeah. And the other thing about the school, it's not only the work is demanding, of course it is, and I enjoy the work, but the drive to the journey to where I work it's a fairly long one, not in many people's commutes, I'm sure, but it's an hour there and there's traffic and perhaps slightly less back. Well, that adds quite a bit to the tiring factor.
Absolutely.
And so, of course, working from home, you've still got that concentration and everything else. But I noticed when in lockdown, when I was doing the work, I noticed how much fresher I was, although I had done, seen a number of students, through the, video or whatever it was I was using. I was fresher, not doing that, and I had more energy for other things.
Yes.
Have had more energy for other things, yeah.
It's been such a blessing, hasn't it, this opportunity? For those of us that are fortunate that haven't lost jobs through it, it's been such a blessing to not have that travelling time and, as you say, to have more energy as well. And I'm looking still at your dream and thinking, it's what you're describing sounds like in the dream where you say, well, the access was difficult, it was narrow, it was full of people, was this shared land? It kind of put me off. Sounds like this is the commuting, this is sharing with all these other cars, there's so many people, it's difficult, it's narrow. There's that kind of feeling, this is too small for me.
Yes. I mean, parking's, it's such a trivial thing, but parking is always an issue because if I don't get there at a certain time, it's difficult to park. Yes. I mean, I have to get there at a certain time, obviously, but I could be more relaxed if the parking wasn't such an issue. But of course, when you're working from home, you haven't got any of those stresses, strains, or aggravations. You haven't got to drag out in the bucketing rain and or snow or ice or whatever it might be. I'm sounding like a terrible old woman.
I was just going to say, I think you're really ready for a change of job.
The way I'm talking myself out of this is quite astonishing, really.
Isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's interesting. You said something about sort of staying small and sort of doing the expected thing versus sort of breaking out and so on. And I guess that's what it comes down to. I don't think it's literally the small, but it is. This is what you do, inverted commas, versus, I mean, I've always, in my younger years, as we were exploring and you were telling me, in my younger years, I wouldn't sound eccentric, but I'm interested in everything. And, I had, obviously I had all the energy then, didn't I, to do and have all these things. But, I know that realistically, I've got to cut my cloth according to the energy that I have available now. And also getting older, there is that whole thing about, well, what do I want to focus on, going forward? I don't want to, I don't, another word, similar to the bungalow, I hate the word retire. And I'm not saying that anybody shouldn't retire or that, and thoroughly enjoy themselves. But personally, I don't like the word retire, and I don't identify with it, and I don't want to be retired. So I'm getting to that age now where, I mean, although the government here pushes the age back and back and back all the time, but I'm getting to the age now where, in the old days, people would be retired.
Yes. And,
so that all that is there.
And when you say, like, in the old days too, you've got to remember that as kids, we were programmed that when you're 65 or whatever it is, that's when you retire. Yes. And even though that age moves on and on and on, and many of us will probably be working till the day we pop off the planet, it's still deeply programmed, deeply ingrained. So even as you reach those years, your part of you is going, oh, should I retire? What should I be doing here? So there's that. And listening to you speaking and, totally seeing where you're coming from, it still reminds me again of the cat with the 9 lives. Like, it's okay, I've reached this point where I'm not going to retire, I'm going to tell a different story about that word. But, I'm thinking about the next phase, my next life. What's it going to be like? And, a dream doesn't tell us what to do, but it reflects where we're at. And so you've got a lot of that conflict in your dream. Do I want this house? No, I don't want it. Why don't I want it? Well, it feels like it's encroaching on my space. I'm not getting any privacy. At the end of the dream, you decide, I actually don't want that house at all. In life, I guess your task is then to say, well, what is the small house that I don't want? Is it the sense of the commute and going back to school? Is it the sense of towing the line for other people and not returning to more of my eccentricities? Is it the sense of the one story I tell myself that this small house is really a small house? Or perhaps do I notice that if I open the doors up, there's all this amazing space and rooms within myself that I haven't explored yet? That many of the symbols in the dream are an offering for you to consider, well, how many different areas in your life can you relate this small space to, with this extra eccentric space behind it, and which of those do you want and which don't you want? And particularly because your deciding factor in the dream, Sue, was there's not enough privacy for me, there's not enough space for what I want, I'm being encroached upon, is to, that I think is the key question. When I Sue move forward to make my post-lockdown choices, or even as early as next week, maybe the key thing to keep in mind is, where is my privacy? Where either do I feel things or commutes or whatever are encroaching on my space, or where am I allowing them to encroach upon my space? And then if you think back to walking your dog the other day past the churchyard, the cemetery, and the cat jumping out and scratching you, I wonder if you were thinking any of these things when that happened.
Yes, I mean, I can't remember what I was thinking. I was definitely in a space where I was musing, but it's been exercising my conscious mind a lot lately. I'm a person that likes to have a plan.
Yes.
And not knowing what's happening, as so many of course so many people in the same boat. But for me, not knowing what's happening, and trying my best to just go with the flow. and just think, well, let's see how it pans out. Don't try and control everything. Just see what occurs. Part of me thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice if they can't find a suitable room, because there's always problems with that. And I was thinking maybe that would be something. And then, this bargain with the universe that I've done, I can almost dip my toe in the water doing things differently. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Maybe there's also... I was going to say, maybe there's also an option where rather than wait and see whether they come back and say that there isn't another room, maybe there's an option where you go and pitch something different. Yes,
I mean, I have done my best to pitch the difference. To be honest, I have said, I really think this works well, and it would be really good to be able to continue to do this. Da-di-da-di-da. But I know realistically that the way things are working here, that the government is saying, look, we want everybody to go back, we want people to go back, we want schools, the most important thing is the schools. And if even somebody like myself, who could easily work from home in that regard for a while, if somebody doesn't go back, then, maybe the students will say, well, why isn't she here then?
Yes.
Why isn't she here? And of course, that doesn't give the students a sense of, well, everything's normal and there's they feel secure. They think, oh, why isn't she here then? What's the matter? Is she scared? Is she frightened to come in because of the disease? Which I'm not. That's not what I'm frightened of at all. I'm not frightened. I'm just thinking, oh, the journey,
Yes.
Yes. So I have done that. And later today, I'm having a Zoom meeting, and I shall find out what the decision is from their end. And that doesn't mean to say that I can't make a separate decision, but I certainly wouldn't, without any notice at all, force being a nice person, and like you said earlier, putting the needs of others before my own.
Yes.
I wouldn't just say, well, no, that doesn't suit me, I'm not doing it. No, not at this late stage. But that doesn't mean I can't change my mind later on.
Exactly, that's right. I think it's maybe even working with the dream symbols, Sue, and saying there's 2 sets of keys and there's valuable jewels. You can forget about the cat's stomach if you like, but to even before your Zoom meeting, to actually have on a piece of paper or do a bit of artwork, given what we've been talking about, and just draw some pictures around what these keys could open in your life, and draw some pictures around what you identify the jewels as in your life. Some of those being about traveling to school and continuing the job, some of them being about how you what you want for yourself versus saying yes and to other people, but basically just sorting out, going into this little box and unpacking it, and in a non-editing, non-conscious kind of mind, just play around on paper and an artwork with, well, what are these jewels? Maybe draw, emeralds and rubies and diamonds, and then just, playfully put little arrows on them and words on them, not bog standard bungalow type, retire type words, but really, really interesting, eccentric words. So label your rubies, label your emeralds, label your sapphires, label your diamonds, whatever, in totally playful, like you're going back to being the child or with the maiden name and the eccentric, and just get that sense on that bit of paper before the Zoom meeting of what your wonderful jewels are, and how you would name them and what stories you would tell. And, the universe works in amazing ways once we actually start to get in touch with those things.
Yes, indeed. Yes, that's a very good idea. Yeah, I'm not very good. It's something that I will facilitate with others, but I'm not very good at doing it for myself. Not that kind of playful, as you say, inner child, and not getting the brain and the logical thing involved. That for me is a really good exercise, because that will really be stepping outside the box.
Okay.
the box.
How are we going to? Yes. How are we going to make you do it though? Then, given that reticence, how are you going to do it? One way is to set a timer that really doesn't give you any time at all for the editing mind to come in. So it's like you'd have to pick the time, but it might only be, say, like 1 minute for each jewel, and you just sort of come at it and you go, oh, no grown adult's going to have time to do it in 1 minute, so I'm just going to slap something down because Jane Teresa asked me to, and that's probably how the right words will come out
quickly.
Yes,
and especially as as it happens, as you say, the meeting is today, and as it happens, I have got a lot on today before that meeting, so I'm not going to have much time. So if I sit down and I do it, in the 10 minutes before the meeting happens, that will be as much time as I will have, really. It's the whole thing, that time thing. I say it so many times. I mean, of course I could make more time, couldn't I? If I just said, right, well, I'll do that instead, rather than this.
See, I'm thinking of the woman in the dream that's easily distracted. How much of the things that you've got to do today are distractions from what needs to be done, etc.
Yes. It's thinking. It's what do they say? It's doing the things that really matter rather than just the things that are in front of you.
Yes.
And I mean, I have got to take the dog out. I'm not going to be going near the cat in the churchyard. But I could, think, although I wouldn't have a piece of paper, I could let my mind,
you could do it in your mind.
While I'm walking.
Are you able to, do you have to have the dog on the lead all the time, or is it a dog off lead place?
No.
I'm
going to go to a dog off lead, yeah.
Right, so she can go off lead, and gender, you can go off lead, and you can sit on a bench with a little bit of paper and a couple of crayons that you popped in your pocket before you went out, and do it then.
Yes, I could indeed. Yes, indeed.
Push. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I will make the time before that meeting to play about with the jewels.
That's great.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're going to walk in and you're going to say, all right, I'll give up my maiden name. Okay, I'll do what you want, without having really considered the jewels.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes. Very interesting. And how bizarre the timeliness of this. The dream is one thing, but to have the opportunity to explore it with you on the very day that I'm having this meeting, and we think that the dream is saying, well, hang on a minute, what about all these other things?
Yes.
Are you just going to, as you say, play small and just do what you've done and do what's expected, or are you going to explore these other avenues? Are you going to think about how else it could be done?
Yes.
And one thing that just even, and it's not, I suppose I am in solution mode, but one thing occurs to me is that, maybe there's a compromise. Maybe there could be, because I do 2 days, I don't do 5 days. So maybe it could be 1 day there and 1 day at home even.
Yes.
That's something that I haven't explored.
Yes.
And it's a possibility. So yeah, I mean, it's very, yes, I can see why I haven't processed this sufficiently myself to come to this, if you like, this learning and this conclusion. Because now I have, with your, very insightful help, got to this point. I'm thinking, oh my God, oh my God, I've got to decide this. I've got to think about this. Oh no, it's like putting it back to me. Oh yeah, you've got to make a choice here. You've got to say, right, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that. Whatever it is, rather than just take the easy way.
Yes, the easy way, and be distracted and agree with other people. This is the beauty of exploring your dreams. It's especially when you commit to doing it. We can all commit to doing it ourselves and learning the tools and techniques, and that's fantastic. Some of us need to have the commitment to talk with someone else to really bring us to the table and explore it. And you've explored it beautifully with me. You've oh yes, I'm making the connection. So the thing is, of course, for people listening in, we're actually recording this within a week of it, I think 6 days before it goes out. So if you have any major breakthroughs or things that you would like to add on before it goes out, maybe you could let me know. I'll chat to you after we've finished recording, and I can sort of put at the end of the blog that accompanies the podcast, and at the Zoom meeting she but we'll see.
No pressure to have an exciting result then.
No, absolutely not. No, you've got to take it at the right pace. Is there anything else you wanted to ask about the dream, Sue, before we wrap?
No, I think that is, very, very interesting, and the way you've taken me through it and explored each element, and that what's come out of it is if I'd have looked at it not with your any insight and so forth, thinking about keys and rooms and so on, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more than the is it this room or that room? There's all this other stuff behind it, which I think that there is a sort of sense of it, burbling about, but I haven't really gone there, and now I have.
That's fantastic,
and that's really useful. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I love the way you've summarised that, and I've very much enjoyed. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Dream Show, and all best wishes for those jewels.
Thank you. I've loved it. Thank you.
I'm sure that you enjoyed that as much as I did, and probably we all related to it on the level of lockdown and how it has affected us. And of course, some of us have, it's been affected more deeply than others, but all of us have at some level, whether or not we yet realise it, been offered the opportunity to open a box that we've not looked in before and see, well, what are the jewels that I do have? What other keys are there here for me? Even if you're going back to the same job or the same situation, how can I do this differently? What more can I bring of myself into this? Or, as in Sue's situation, do I want to do that? Do I want to go another way? And for others of us that might have lost jobs and lost income and lost all sorts of things, as well as, of course, losing people that are dear to us through death, even though these questions are much, much harder and you may not be feeling that they're the right questions yet, they will come one day. How do I move forward? How much more deeply can I dig into this box? What other jewels are there? What have I left behind? What are my eccentricities? What keys are there that I haven't noticed? How can I do my life differently in a more positive way? So I think there's many, hopefully we won't be doing many more Dream podcasts where we are referencing lockdown, because wouldn't it be nice if we're all out of it? But while it's continuing, I think these are wonderful, deep things that we can all reflect upon at our different levels. And maybe when people are listening back to this, and this may be you, it may be 10 years on from now, and you may have delved into the archives and you may be listening back and saying, oh, remember those days of the lockdown. I wonder what you did differently during that time. Mentioning the podcast as well as listening to them all at janeteresa.com, every single one of them. You can always listen to the last 10 or so on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, the list is endless. But if you go where you often listen to your podcasts and you subscribe to, don't just search for The Dream Show, that gets confusing. Search for The Dream Show with Jane Teresa Anderson and you can subscribe and never miss one, and learn about how to work with your dreams through listening in. And also, of course, I hope that you share the shows that particularly you find helpful, that you share those with other people. JaneTeresa.com, dream-academy-online.com. And our next episode of The Dream Show, episode 235, is due out on the 8th of October 2020 if you're listening in real time. I know I'll be talking about some of you that I work with on a regular basis between now and then. And to all of you, thank you for listening to yet another episode of The Dream Show. I'm Jane Teresa Anderson.